She couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the memory of that creepy little gothic room, which she suspected Eve really deeply loved. But all of a sudden her lovely, cozy room seemed full of shadows, and the creaks of old wood in the wind sounded stealthy. Maybe the house eats people, Claire thought. Lying there alone in the dark, watching the bone-thin shadows of branch shudder in the far wall. The wind made twigs tap her windows, like something trying to get in. Eve had said vampires couldn't get in. What if they could? What if they were already inside? What if Michael... She heard a soft, silvery note, and knew that Michael was playing downstairs. Something about that helped push the shadows back. Turn the sound into something normal and soothing. It was just a house, and they were just kids sharing it. And if there was anything wrong, well, it was outside. She must have slept then, but it didn't feel like it. Some noise startled her awake, and when Claire checked the clock next to her bed, it was close to 5:30. The sky wasn't light outside, but it wasn't totally dark either. The stars were faded, soft sparkles in the sky gradually turning dark blue. Michael's guitar was still going, very quietly. Didn't he ever sleep? Claire slid out of bed, tossed a blanket over her shoulders over the t-shirt she wore, to bed, and shuffled out and into the still dark hallway. As she passed the hidden door, she glanced at it and shivered, then continued on to the bathroom. Once she got that out of the way and brushed her hair, she crept quietly down the steps and sat down, blanket around her, listening to Michael play. His head was down, and he was deep into it. She watched his fingers move light and quick on the strings. His body rocked slowly with the rhythm, and felt a deep sense of safety. Nothing bad could happen around Michael. She just knew it. Next to him, a clock beeped an alarm. He looked up, startled, and slapped it off. Then got up and put his guitar away. She watched, puzzled. Did he have someplace to be? Or did he actually have to set an alarm to go to bed? Wow, that was obsession. Michael stood watching the clock as if it were his personal enemy, and then he turned and walked over to the window. The sky was color of dark turquoise now. All but the strongest stars faded. Michael, holding a beer in his hand, drank the rest of the bottle and put it down on the table, crossed his arms and waited. Claire was about to ask him what he was waiting for, when the first ray of sun crept up in a blinding orange knife, and Michael gasped and hunched over, pressing his stomach. Claire lunged to her feet, startled and afraid for the look of sheer agony on his face. The movement caught his attention, and he jerked his head toward her, blue eyes wide. "No!" he moaned, and pitched forward to his hands and knees, gasping. "Don't!" She ignored that and jumped down the stairs to run to his side. But once she was there, she didn't know what to do. Didn't have any idea how to help. Michael was breathing in deep, aching gasps in terrible pain. She put her hand on his back, felt his feather-hard skin burning through the thin cloth, and heard him make a sound like nothing she'd ever heard in her life. Like someone dying. She thought in panic, and opened her mouth to scream for Shane, Eve, anybody. Her hand suddenly went right through him. The scream, for whatever reason, locked tight in her throat as Michael, transparent Michael, looked up at her with despair and desperation in his eyes. "Oh, God, don't tell them!" His voice came from a long, long way off, a whisper that faded on the shafts of morning sun. And so did he. Claire, mouth still open, utterly unable to speak, waved her hand slowly through the thin air where Michael Glass had been standing. Slowly, then faster. The air felt cold around her, like she was standing in a blast from an air conditioner. And chill slowly faded, like Michael. "Oh my God," she whispered, and clapped both hands over her mouth. A muffled the scream that she had to let out or explode. She might have blacked out a little, because next thing she knew, she was sitting on the couch next to Michael's guitar case, and she felt kind of funny. Bad funny. As if her brain had turned liquid and sloshed around in her head. Weirdly calm, though. She reached over and touched the leather cover of his guitar case. It felt real. When she flipped up the latches and pulled her shaking fingers across the strings, they made a wistful soft of whispers. "He's a ghost. Michael's a ghost." He wasn't a ghost. How could he be a ghost if he sat here, right here, at the table and ate dinner, tacos, What kind of ghost ate tacos? What kind of... Her hand went right through him. Right through him. But he was real. She touched him. Her hand went right through him. Just don't panic. There's some explanation. Yeah, right. She stumbled over to Professor Wu's physics class and asked. She could just imagine how that would go over. They'd toss a net over her and pump her full of Prozac or whatever. He said, "Oh God, don't tell them." Tell who? Was he gone? Was he dead? She was about carried away by panic again. And then something stopped it cold. Something silly, really. The alarm clock sitting on the table next to the sofa. The one that hadn't gone off just a few minutes ago. The one that had warned Michael that sunrise was coming. This happens every day. He hadn't acted like it was odd, just painful. She and Eve had both said that Michael slept days. They were both night owls. They were sound asleep right now and wouldn't be up for hours yet. Michael could have disappeared daily like this with nobody paying any attention. Until she came along and got nosy. Don't tell them. Why not? What was so secret? She was crazy. That was the only rational explanation. But if she was crazy, she wasn't rational. Clara curled up on the sofa, shivering, and felt cold air brush over her again. Ice cold. She sat up. Michael? She blurted and sat very still. The chill went away, then blushed over again. I think I can feel you. Are you still here? Another second or two without the icy draft, and then it drifted across her skin. So, you can see us? Yes, she figured. Since the warm-cold cycle repeated. You don't go away during the day? Oh, stay where you are if it's no, okay? The chill stayed steady. Wow, that's harsh. And yes. And weirdly she felt a little cheered. Okay, she was having a conversation with a breeze. But at least she didn't feel alone. You don't want me to tell Shane and Reeve? Clearly I know. If anything, I got colder. Is there anything I can do? Also no. Michael, will you come back? Yes. Tonight? Yes, again. We are so going to talk. The chill withdrew completely. Yes. She glanced back on the sofa, feeling giddy and strange and exhausted. There was a radio blanket piled near the guitar case. She carefully moved the instrument over to the table and imagined invisible Michael following her anxiously the whole way. Then wrapped herself in the blanket and let herself drift off into sleep, with the ticking of the grandfather clock and memories of Michael's guitar as a soundtrack. That day, Clay went to class. Eve argued with her. Shane didn't. Nothing much happened. Although Clara spotted Monica twice on campus, Monica was surrounded by admirers, both male and female, and didn't have time for grudges. Claire kept her head down and stayed out of any deserted areas. It was an early afternoon for her, no labs, and although she wanted to get home and wait around for Michael to show up, and boy, she wanted to see how that happened. She knew she'd drive herself crazy and make Shane suspicious. As she walked in that general direction, she spotted the small coffee shop wedged in between the skateboard shop and a used bookstore. Common grounds. That was where Eve worked, That was where Eve worked, and she'd said to stop by. The bell rang with a silvery tinkle as Claire pushed open the door, and it was like walking into the living room of the glass house. Only a little more gothic. Black leather sofas and chairs. Thick, colorful rugs, ancient walls in beige and blood red. Lots of nooks and crannies. There were 5 or 6 students scattered at cafe tables and built-in desks. None looked up from their books or computers. The whole place smelled like coffee, a constant simmering warmth. Claire stood for a second, indecisive, and then walked over to an empty desk and dumped her backpack before going to the counter. There were 2 people behind the waist-high barrier. One was Eve, of course, looking perky and doll-like with her dark hair and 2 pigtails. Eyes rimmed with liner and lipstick, a dramatic goth black. She was wearing a black mesh shirt over a red camisole, and she grinned when she spotted Claire. The other was an old man, tall, thin, with grey and curly hair that fell nearly to his shoulders. He had a nice square face, wide dark eyes, and a ruby earring in his left ear. Hippie to the core, Claire guessed. He smiled too. "Hey, it's Claire," Eve said, and hurried around the counter to slip her arm around Claire's shoulders. "Claire, this is Oliver, my boss." Claire nodded hesitantly. He looked nice. But hey, a boss? Bosses made her nervous, like parents. "Hello, sir." "Sir?" Oliver had a deep voice, an even deeper laugh. "Claire, you've got to learn more about me. I'm not a sir, believe me." "That's true." Eve nodded wisely. "He's a dude. You'll like him. Hey, want a coffee? My treat. Don't touch the stuff, right?" Eve rolled her eyes. "A non-coffee drink coming up. How about hot cocoa? Chai? Tea?" "Tea, I guess." Eve went back behind the counter and did some stuff within a couple of minutes. A big white cup and saucer appeared in front of Claire, with a tea bag steeping in the steaming water. "On the house. Well, actually on me, because yikes, boss is right here." Oliver, who was working on some complicated machine that Claire guessed was something that made cappuccino, shook his head and grinned to himself. Claire watched him curiously. He looked a little bit like a distant cousin she'd met from France, that the same kind of hook nose anyway. She wondered if he'd been a professor at the university or just a perpetual student. Either was possible. "I heard you had some trouble," Oliver said, still concentrating on unscrewing parts on the machine. "Girls in the dorm?" "Yeah." She admitted and felt her cheeks burn. "Everything's okay, though. I'm sure it is. Listen, though. If you have trouble like that, you come here and tell me about it. I'll make sure it stops." He said it with absolute assurance. She blinked, and his dark eyes moved to rest on hers for a few seconds. "I'm not without influence around here. Eve tells me that you are very gifted. We can't have some bad apples driving you off." Thanks?" She didn't mean to make it a question. It just come out of the way. "Thanks, I will." Oliver nodded and went back to his work, dissecting the coffee maker. Claire found a seat not far away. Eve slipped out from behind the counter and pulled up a chair next to her, leaning forward, all restless energy. "Isn't he great?" she asked. "He means it, you know. He's got some kind of pipeline to—" She made a V sign with her fingers. A V for vampires. "They listen to him. He's good to have on your side."